The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the European Industry MedDRA User Group webinar. This meeting will be chaired by myself, Christina Winter from the MedDRA User Group, and Destiny Hutchison and Brian O'Hare from the MSO will be providing the technical support. If you wish to ask questions, you can submit questions during the presentation by going to your control panel, and there's a little screenshot on the right-hand side showing you where you can put in questions. You take that question section and open it so that it has a drop down, then you'll be able to type your questions, and when you finish typing, just press send, which is down here. Now, the question can be addressed at the end of each topic. We've got 2 topics, and also in the Q&A, which will be at the end of both. And unfortunately, due to time constraints, we won't be able to answer every single question that's been submitted. Now, frequently asked questions: can you get a copy of these slides? Yes. Is the webinar being recorded so that you or others can view it at a later time? Yes. And it will be on the website that's shown here, www.meddra.org/user groups. And all the older webinars are also in there if you wish to refer to any of them. Now, who are the organizers? This is the user group, and it's basically the steering committee who organize a couple of webinars a year. And they also assist in organizing the annual meeting in Europe in collaboration. Basically, that is the MSSO's meeting, but this group also assists by putting in agenda items. Martin here is my backup moderator, just in case technically something goes wrong. He also chairs this particular group. Chris is a representative in the MedDRA Management Committee in ICH, and the others may or may not be familiar to you. Oh, sorry, Felix is also in the MedDRA Management Committee at ICH. So these are experienced MedDRA users, and this is myself in the corner. So we've got Morel, formerly MHRA, Uta, Chris I've introduced, Jane, who's a trainer with the MSSO, but she's also been a member of this group long before she joined the MSSO. Kirsten, Felix I've introduced, Martin I have, Amit, Ranjani, Ian Slack, who's in his best dicky bows, has been previous moderator. I'm sure you've seen him. And so I'll move on from here. There are a few polling questions which Brian and Destiny will now control. Okay, I presume that as that button's gone, I can move to the next question. question 3. Are you on question 4, Destiny?
Yes.
Sorry.
Okay, we're done with the polling questions.
Thank you. Now, I don't know if anybody spotted my deliberate mistakes. When I was introducing the members of the steering committee, Felix is a member of the Points to Consider Working Group, ICH, not the MedDRA Management Committee. And the Points to Consider is chaired by Martin, the co-presenter. Thank you. The agenda. We're starting with Nicole, who will present an overview of MedDRA mappings so that you can look at different terminologies and map them to MedDRA. She's from the MSSO, and that will be followed by a short Q&A and then real-world evidence and code mappings using an app, and Jan Feifel from Merck will be presenting that. Following that, there'll be further Q&A and open house discussions. So let's move on to Nicole. Nicole's been working with the MSSO for about 3 years now as a clinical associate. She's also working as a trainer with various MedDRA mappings available. Previously, she's worked at various pharmaceutical and biotech companies and has experience in both clinical development and pharmacovigilance. She's got extensive experience working with and using MedDRA, as well as leading medical coding teams. She's currently based in northern New Jersey in the United States of America. Over to you, Nicole, for your slides.
Oh, thank you, Christina. Okay, let me just share my screen. Give me one second. Oops. Nope. 1 second. There we go. You should be able to see my slides. Can I just get confirmation of that before I begin?
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, well, hello everyone, and thank you for having me today. So today I am hoping to shed some light on MedDRA interoperability and provide a high-level overview of what the MSSO offers from a mapping perspective. So exactly, you may ask yourself, so exactly what is interoperability? So quite simply, interoperability in the context of medical terminologies allows users to convert data coded in one terminology to another. So it is technically defined as the ability of different computerized systems or products to connect and exchange information with one another. It's important to note that during this exchange, the data being mapped has the potential to lose some of the information, meaning it may not be a one-to-one match, which sometimes people think, or it's thought to be expected that there's a one-to-one match in mapping, but it might not always be the case. And I will go through this in more detail in a couple of slides. Okay, so this slide details a list of the current mappings available with MedDRA. So as you can see, there is a wide variety from the Who Art Bridge, which is an older mapping that's available. It's been ongoing for several years, to the more recent SNOMED CT and ICD-10 and MedDRA mappings that are available. Okay, so this chart, I know it's very busy, but it's a detailed chart that lists all the relevant links as well as a description and maintenance information for each mapping available. So it's a really good reference point to kind of have. I wanted to put this chart in the presentation so everyone does have this after the presentation's done, and you may go back to your normal day-to-day and you ask yourself, hey, I want a little more information around this. So you can always reference this chart and then see here, if you want to see about SNOMED and MedDRA, that it's a bidirectional mapping and has a subset of high frequency pharmacovigilance terms between SNOMED, CT, and MedDRA. We have a link to our mapping page on there, as well as for all the other mappings that are available and links to where you can find information around them, a short description. Very, very good slide just to keep, as a reference point for future. So with that being said, this slide actually represents where all the mapping information is available online. So how you get to this page, it's a screenshot, obviously, of our internet page, but you first navigate to MedDRA.org, which is on the top of the slide, and then you navigate to the How to Use tab. So you go to How to Use, you drop down, and you will see here there's a mapping. My arrow's slightly off here, but I tried my best. But it should link, you just click on that mapping by where that arrow is, and then it will take you to this page, which is our mapping page. So once the mapping tab is clicked, you'll be here. Again, you're on MedDRA.org. So like the chart, this page provides detailed high-level information around any mapping you may have an interest in, as you can see from this screenshot. The page also contains valuable links for the MapCR tool. Let me just pull this up here. I zoomed in a little bit. All the links are available on the right-hand side of this slide, and then I zoomed in to show you what links are available. But it does contain valuable links for the MapCR tool, as well as any other supporting information, including links to other terminology pages. And that, again, is also available within the chart I just showed you. So if you have any initial questions around mapping, I would suggest taking a look at the mapping page, referencing the mapping chart I just showed, or you can email us at mapping@meddra.org, which I'll have at a slide further at the end of the presentation, so that you have that email address available. Okay, so now moving on to SNOMED CT and MedDRA mapping, since it is one of the more recent mappings that have become available. So the SNOMED CT and MedDRA mapping was initially released in April of 2021, so about 3 years ago. So when I onboarded with the MSSO was around the time the SNOMED maps were released. So the mapping is updated each April by the MSSO mapping team, as well as the SNOMED CT mapping team. So we are very collaborative in the process of updating these maps. We work together as a team, and we start in the beginning of each year, and we have the maps released by end of April of each year. So the maps have been updated in the past to include new map terms from prior user requests. So we had in the past around 250 requests that came in when the maps were originally released, as well as more recently, we have updated the maps with changes stemming from new content in either dictionary. So whether it be a MedDRA currency change or SNOMED CT inactivation. So the maps are based on the fall release of MedDRA, so which would be the 0.1 release of MedDRA, and a January release of SNOMED. So that's why the process begins in the beginning of each year, because we wait for SNOMED to release their new version, which happens, I believe, the second, third week of January, and then the process starts, because we do like to incorporate that new version of SNOMED as well. So the most recent maps available are based on MedDRA 26.1, like I said, the 0.1 release of MedDRA, and the January 2024 release of SNOMED. So an initial, so now we'll move on to ICD-10 to MedDRA mapping. So an initial mapping of MedDRA and ICD-10 has been developed in support of the MedDRA Management Committee, or we sometimes say MC Committee. The 2019 version of ICD-10 was used, and an agreement was developed by both ICD and the WHO for distribution and maintenance of the ICD-10 to measure mappings. So the mapping contains over 11,000 terms, so it's quite big. 11,000 is a lot of maps. It also includes an attribute in the ICD-10 mapping to describe the individual maps. So the attribute is important to help the user understand the impact of mapping. So 3 attributes were used. They were as follows. They were equivalent, which simply means there's no loss of information, or it was equivalent, almost a one-to-one match. Then there was loss of information, which means some information got lost in the mapping from ICD-10 to MedDRA. And finally, we have an unmappable, which means the term is outside the scope of mapping, or no appropriate term exists to capture the term and provide a useful map to our users. So we had to make that also available, because in some instances, you know, there are cases where in a map, when you're doing a mapping or you're even mapping yourself, there are instances where you can lose information, but then there are instances where maybe that loss of information is a little bit too much. And in that case, then we have to say, at that point, then it becomes unmappable. And again, it could also be because the terms are out of scope. Okay, so this slide details some examples of each attribute. So it's important to note the mappings are available in Excel format and can be downloaded from the mapping page on MedDRA.org that I showed you earlier. So the MSSO will maintain the mapping, and it will be based on any MedDRA and ICD updates, as well as any user input. And we're always looking for user input. So if you have a chance, you know, you want to look around, or you are actually using the ICD or SNOMED or even the Huart Bridge mappings, and you have any input that you would like to provide to us, please feel free to email us at that mapping@meddra.org email, as well as go on the mapping page. You can do everything from there, and you'll have to input into the MapCR tool, which is available. I showed you the link earlier. You can go in and provide us feedback, and we do try to incorporate feedback, or we will at least provide a response to the feedback that we receive. Okay, so now I'm moving on to ICD-11 mapping. So the MedDRA Management Committee supported exploration with the WHO of the development and maintenance of ICD-11 and MedDRA mappings. So this is a very large task given the sheer size of ICD-11. It's very, very large. So the mappings will be maintained by the MSSO in coordination with the WHO. The initiative is currently under development, and more details will emerge as the mapping progresses. So we currently are in, say, a mapping phase right now where we are doing the work for this. These are not yet released maps, but as more develops, we will provide more information around it. So I provided a mapping maintenance slide, which is the slide you see on my screen now, to serve as a reminder of the maintenance around certain mappings. So we already detailed kind of the ICD and SNOMED releases and the maintenance around that, but it's also important to note that the Huart Bridge is updated twice a year based on each MedDRA release, and it's updated within the MSSO. So the existing maps are reviewed to ensure that there aren't any LLTs that underwent a currency change. If there are, they are updated, as well as if there's a better LLT that may exist. That, like I said earlier in the presentation, this Huart Bridge is one of the oldest mappings we had available. So we make sure that we are constantly updating it. And it's also important to note that, like I said, this does get updated twice a year. So with each MedDRA release, we make a new file available for everyone, and we check to ensure that everything is up to date within the file. Okay, so I kind of briefly touched upon this, but if you would like to suggest any changes to existing maps, please be sure to do so using the MapCR tool, which I provided a link for. I should have actually put it on the slide, I apologize, but there is a link available to it within the earlier slide. But it also can be found on the mapping page of MedDRA.org. So where I showed you to navigate to, you can go there, and when I zoomed in on the slide earlier, you can just click that link. It will take you right to the MapCR tool. So users can request changes to an existing map, or they may suggest new maps for consideration. And any licensed MedDRA user can request these maps. So with that being said, I am already at the end of my brief presentation today. I just wanted to do a quick high-level overview of what we offer, what is currently available, give you some links that you have, a detailed chart. And if you have any additional questions or would like to request mapping changes, please feel free to contact us at mapping@meddra.org, and we will be sure to provide any information you need or answer any questions. So with that being said, I'd just like to say thank you very much for having me today for this little short overview, high-level overview. And I would like to see, are there any questions we can take now? And if not, we can also take questions after Jan presents. So thank you very much.
Right. Well, thank you, Nicole. This is Brian. There are no questions at this time. I just want to remind all the attendees, if you do have a question, please do add it to the question pane or question panel. Oh, here we go. We just have a question right now. How do I download the CTCAE mappings? On the download page, I'm logged in, I only see the SNOMED or ICD mappings.
Yeah, so let me actually, I'm gonna do it in real time, if that's okay. I'm just gonna take everyone to the MedDRA.org page. Right here, this is our website. Everyone can see this, right? What I'm doing. If you go to mapping here, you'll see the links on the side. So the CTCAE is right here. You can click on this and everything you need will be here for you to be able to access that information. And all the other links are available as well. And again, I did provide a screenshot of this, but it is always nice to see it in person. So it's that simple. You just kind of go to the mapping page and then every link you need. And the CR tool where I was suggesting to, where you can provide changes for us, that pops up. That is available as a link as well. And you can go in and provide your feedback to us as well. Any other questions?
Yeah, I think, Nicole, the question was regarding the CTCAE mapping. So there's no specific download for that in the MedDRA website.
Yeah, no, there's no specific, but here's where you can click on it and then get all the information you need, but there is no download for it.
Right. So is it correct to say that that particular mapping is just a subset of MedDRA terms in this case?
Yes.
Versus external mapping. Okay. So this is where you would go to find the specific.
All the information.
Okay.
Yes, it's not maintained by the MSSO. I'll bring up this chart again if you can see this here. So it's maintained by the National Cancer Institute, and the next scheduled release is for 2024. And this is the website again that you can click and get any information you need on that. So we don't have the download available on the actual web page. You would have to go through the link.
Okay, one more question here. Please clarify what is being mapped between ICD and MedDRA. Do the map the whole foundational terms, including synonym terms without ICD code, or just the terminology?
So we are mapping for which ICD, 10 or 11? 10, I suppose.
Let's go with 10 for the moment, unless we get clarification from this.
Okay, so we did have a subset of 11,000 terms that were, oh no, that was for ICD-10. We do have a subset of mortality used for coding for the actual subset. What was the question again, Brian? I'm sorry, because I don't want to.
Well, okay, so let me clarify. The question here being asked in this case is actually referring to ICD-11. So what is being mapped between ICD-11 and MedDRA? Are you mapping the whole foundational terms, including synonym terms without ICD codes, or just the coded terminology?
So just the coded terminology for ICD-11.
Great. Okay. Well, I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. So I think we can move on to the next part of the agenda. And as I said, if anyone has any questions, please use the question panel, and then we'll get to those questions at the end of the session today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can you see my screen? It should say real world evidence and code mappings. Right. Has it appeared yet?
Yes.
Thank you. The next speaker will be Jan Feifel from Merck. He's going to talk about real world evidence and code mappings and show us how to move between different coding systems using an app. Now, Jan Feifel is a statistician and a data scientist at Merck Healthcare, KGaA. He studied maths at Heidelberg and Ulm and did a PhD in biostats at the University of Ulm while spending time in Copenhagen. He focuses on machine statistical learning, causal inference, and time-to-event methods for real-world data across different therapeutic areas. At Merck, he's leading a group of real-world data analysts and drives the development of new technologies, especially apps and AI. Over to you, Jan, for your presentation.
Thank you, Christina, for that nice introduction. I will share my screen. Please let me know as soon as you can see it.
Yes.
We have to switch to the full screen mode. You should see now my presentation. And first, I give you a brief introduction into real-world evidence. Maybe some of you are already familiar, and then I will dive into how we can use code mappings here and what we did with an app in order to ease our work on a daily basis. With that, short disclaimer, this is a huge thank out to the app developers. They were actually driving the main work, and that is developing the app. Chance should be first give an overview on real-world data, real-world evidence. What is it? Where they come from? What does it help in pharma companies? Then we go into the challenges we have when we deal with real-world data. And finally, come to the interesting part, that's how the coding systems are connected and how the code list builder app, that's the name of the app, it's kind of used at Merck, and we give also an example of the usage of the app here live in this session. So real-world data. You see here a picture that's an advertisement of the Land Rover, and that's very common for cars that they come with these pictures. So what do I want to point your attention to? It's not necessarily the car itself, because we're not selling cars, we're selling trucks, but at the bottom there is a statement on the fuel consumption, and I can increase that for you so you can easily read that. Usually it's always done like that. That means whenever you want to get a car on the market, you have to test it, and you see already some similarities. And here you test it for the consumption of for example, liter per 100 kilometers, since I'm based in Europe. And you have different values here for the urban, the extra urban, and the combined. And then how that usually is, it states that real world figures may differ. Why is that? Well, usually how this thing works is if you're not driving a car just in a conventional city and then you measure how much gasoline you have used. Well, this is done on an artificial test drive setting where you run your car. And then based on these numbers, the car will be marketed. However, if you run it in a usual city, these numbers might differ. And that's essentially the point here. similar to real-world data and clinical trial data. So clinical trial data is where we test it in a very controlled environment, whereas in the real world, we don't have that controlled environment. We have conventional clinical practice, and things might not be always as they were in a clinical trial. And that's one key driver that drives real-world data analysis. With that introduction, what is real-world data? Well, real-world data, that's information about patients, their characteristics, their care and outcomes that are captured during, as I've already highlighted, actual medical practice. So that means physicians, for example, are taking notes on how they treat patients, and then these notes are just as collected during their regular visits or special visits. Nevertheless, there's no specific care taken on these things, but for some, you can buy them and you can leverage them for taking additional information out and helping with the drug development. And so real-world evidence is more or less the analysis of real-world data. So that's clinical evidence well generating from these data, and that's used to then have benefits for or assessing risks for a medical product. It's worth mentioning here that these definitions are not always completely agreed on. I think in that group here, it makes a lot of sense to be precise. But as you see at the bottom, the FDA and also some prominent figures of the EMA, the Japanese authorities, all of them are pretty in line with these definitions. So here we have some clarity. Diving more into, okay, what does it really bring to us? You see on the top picture, two curves. One is a green curve and the other one is a dark blue curve. So the dark blue curve is the past and the green curve is the present. And the curve indicates how much evidence is needed during the drug development. And while in the past, you see the curve smaller than the green one, there was less evidence needed. Nowadays, you have to provide a lot of evidence to convince certain parties during the development process. And that's also here in light blue are points highlighted where real-world data can come in and can support the conventional setup, which is usually done with clinical trials. So we have on the left-hand side, research and development. We can influence here with real-world data. We have the launch setup. It's possible to influence here, and then we have the growth and mature phase of a product. And that's where usually real-world data was used, but nowadays real-world data is spread all across this entire time frame here. And as I said, there are different ways how you can use this data. You can identify potential pathways. You can identify indications. You can create external control. So what is that? An external control is more or less single-arm clinical trial where you put on top a real-world control set that's serving as the control rather than a randomized control arm. You have patient-reported outcomes. So that's another interesting topic, focusing more on the patient's need directly and not only on the effectiveness and safety. That is, of course, very important in clinical development. You can investigate safety signals in a real-world environment, not just in a clinical trial. All the budget and HTA-related topics are also in scope of real-world data. Going more towards number 3 here, you can utilize it to describe treatment patterns and the adherence of patients. You can investigate effectiveness, and as I said, especially in the growth and mature, if more products come on the market, it's important to see, okay, how are we doing compared to a competitor? You can have comparative effectiveness analyses. You can identify subpopulations that are of dire need of improvements or that are already a good fit for the product on the market. And all these things. So there's a lot of use cases to real-world data in pharma. Luckily, that's also one of the reasons why I still have a job. So we have usually how we drive these things, we have a research question. That means that's the center, that's the thing we want to answer, and then we select the data. I have talked a lot about a setting where we look at secondary data, but it's probably worth you also mentioning that we can do primary data collection as well. Well, this could be considered real-world data. So what's the difference then to randomized clinical trial? Well, the point is exactly the randomization. In real-world data, we don't intervene. So that's also why we call these studies non-interventional studies. We don't force patients to take either the respective treatment or the placebo. We just observe what was given to them on conventional clinical practice. And then we try to analyze that. It comes, of course, statistically with some challenges. Again, not part of this talk today, but there is the possibility to collect primary data. And on the other hand, there's the possibility to use secondary data. Secondary data is data that was originally collected for one purpose, and now we reuse it for a different purpose. And here we have also the possibility to look for the events we are interested in or different drug exposures. A very popular example are administrative databases, for example, containing claims, or we have hospital records. And I have even more examples here on this slide. So you can have a lot of perspectives on patients. Starting on the top right, we have the doctor's perspective. So that means we have EHR, EMR records. I've already explained to you a physician taking notes, and then later on you can get a look at these notes and leverage them. They of course have some information, but they're certainly not as complete as you would consider data that is collected within a clinical trial. Another point could be claims data. Claims data is what I call accountant's point of view on data. So that means they're used in order to get reimbursed usually. Reimbursed by insurance companies. So their main focus is on the financial side of things, but they of course can be leveraged to get information on patients, on their treatments, and on their diseases. Pharmacy records, again, if you're more interested into adherence, you can leverage these kind of records, but they're fairly similar to claims records. Patient-reported outcomes, that's a new field that's getting more and more popular. Here we're talking about surveys conducted in patients, but also interesting concepts like social listening. That means us leveraging information that is available in social networks, like, for example, Facebook, and then leveraging that to benefit of the patient. We have hospital records. That's, again, a bit related to the EMR data with the specificity that hospitals usually provide a more in-depth care for specific diseases. Think about oncology in the US, for example. We have national registries. That's something that's very popular in the Scandinavian countries. So that's Denmark, Sweden, Norway, and Finland. There they have vast data pools where they more or less contain exhaustively all inhabitants of the country, and they collect data for them. So you can have a very good view on the patients there and have a lot of data. Basically, almost all data I've mentioned so far mapped to these patients, and you have a holistic view. And of course, we have the primary data collection. I don't think I have to go through that once more. We've already elaborated on that. So we have all these data, and it's great we can use it. We want to use it. It helps us, as we have seen in our development. But how can we use it? And here comes in code lists. Code lists are used here to harmonize these data. So usually these data are broad. They're broader than one research question. In a clinical trial, you attempt to answer one research question. With these data, usually you can answer multiple hundreds of research questions. Their sizes are huge. So we have sometimes over 100 million patients and over 100 billion records. So we need ways to harmonize these data. And that's where we use coding and also then later on code lists. We need however, a reliable and feasible way to filter that information. As I said, more than one research question, and we want to only look at those data that is relevant for our research question. So how can we do that? Well, through to a unification of these data. We can use code lists, so that is a subset of the codes you shared, and by that we can filter these data. And these things can be done on huge servers that are actually capable of handling these many records. And then we can identify the concepts we're interested in, and by that building our cohort similar as you would do while applying inclusion-exclusion criteria for a clinical trial. And yeah, as I said, these code lists are more or less the basis of the filtering for the data. Giving some examples of challenges when it comes to codes and code lists. So I have already mentioned electronic health records. So that's information about the patient, and here I choose an example in oncology. So we have cancer, and in this data we have different origins of information. I mentioned that it is coming from the clinician. That is true, but also he might use different other sources of information. For example, a radiologist who will at some point analyze the cancer sample the clinician provided to him and give his recommendation, okay, what type of cancer we're actually facing concrete. And then you have a code. He provides the code in ICD because that's what his computer system tells him to do. You have the oncologist himself. He covers the current treatment of the cancer, and he might also, due to the treatment, record some adverse events. He wants to do that in MedDRA. That's what his system tells him to do. We have the laboratory. They analyze blood samples, and they provide a more genomic point of view on the patient. And they decide to code in SNOMED. And to make life even more complete, we could have a general physician that provides the historic records to the patient, and he doesn't have a coding system at all. So our data set currently consists not of one or of two, but of 3 different coding systems. Nevertheless, if we want to leverage that, we have to navigate these coding systems. And that is the challenge. Another question could be, we are asked by an authority whether there's an increased risk for cancer in patients with a specific drug treated in Germany. So what we would like to do is we would like to leverage multiple data sets to get the relevant information and the intended coverage. So we need a data set in Germany, and we need something to compare it to. For example, we take German claims and we compare them to French claims. The German claims, again, I have explained what claims data is coded in ICD-10 and ICD-9 for some older records. Whereas the French claims, they're only coded in, or not only, but they're coded in MedDRA. So again, a different coding system. And yeah, we have to again merge these two together in order to harmonize them and analyze them together. Another example would be, we were asked, okay, how many patients with MS develop a malignancy, so cancer? And the clinician provides us with codes, MedDRA codes that are relevant for the specific malignancies. However, our data doesn't have the MedDRA codes. We have data only in ICD codes. So we need to translate that and send it back, translate it into the MedDRA so that he understands what especially we have identified. And the entire discussion is more or less translated through these codes. So you have seen there are a lot of tasks regarding translating codes from one coding system to another in real-world data. And that's where these mappings come in, and also then as a next step, the app. So we have seen before, and thank you, Nicole, for that nice introduction, because that takes away a bit of talking on that slide. We have seen these maps. So, and this is just an example, a screenshot of one of the maps you provide. So here you have a map from ICD to MedDRA. And they're super helpful. We can use them, and we can work with them. They give basically the fundamental translation, and we have multiple connections. So we have it not only for ICD to MedDRA, we have seen it MedDRA to SNOMED, and all these things. And they're regularly updated. That means we are also on pace with the newest developments, for example, COVID-19. But if we really want to work with them, then they're very lengthy, and filtering, collecting all the information we have in our databases might be a bit lengthy and time consuming. Some of our researchers even mentioned they were confused, and especially when they had to work with multiple Excel tables at the same time, trying to get this information together. That was when they saw room for improvement, and that's when we decided, okay, let's develop something that is hopefully helping. And this is what we call the Code List Builder app. You see it here on the right-hand side. And this is an app that uses these codings at the back and provides a user interface that is more, more appealing to the customers. It has enhanced capabilities for user experience as well. And so far, we got a pretty great resonance. We established this product in 2020. It is developed using R Shiny. R Shiny is so R itself is an analysis language, programming language, and R Shiny is the app counterpart to that allows you to build these kind of apps. And we host it on an internal web server, so everybody who's working at Merck has access to that tool and can leverage it in their daily work. This is my second to last slide before we dive really into the app and exploring how that works. So what you see in the app is on the left-hand side, you have different source coding systems. So you have to decide, okay, from which coding system I want to start. And then here I have chosen MedDRA. And then on the right-hand side, you see the top picture. I can maybe get a pointer, makes life easier. So here we have a search functionality that allows us to filter the terms, and these long lists become more manageable. Here we can then, based on the filter, already select the synonyms we want. So we have filtered for malignant. That means it will screen through all the text and identify terms that contain that term. Here at the bottom, you can select, okay, where do I want to translate this information to? Because as I said, translating is the key functionality. What you see is no translation at all. So we just see what we have selected. These two are listed here, and we just see the lowest level term and their preferred term. But we could also have them translated into different languages. We see that in a few seconds. And on the right-hand side, we have some additional features that allow us to handle larger lists that you don't need to type these things, but you can upload specific Excel documents and so on. Yeah, and with that, I would dive right into the demonstration of the app. And I hope you can still see my screen. And you should see now a web browser where I have opened the app. Is that correct?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, great. So I brought a few examples. So what we could do is we could say, okay, we're interested in kidney injury. So we could easily with that app filter for kidney injury, and then we would get here all the different terms we are interested in. We could change that and say, okay, we want kidney failure. Again, we would get the respective terms. Now we would maybe not be interested in all terms because we're only interested in acute kidney failure. So that means we won't select the chronic ones, but only the others. So the tool allows us to filter that and select easily the terms we're interested in. And another thing we could do is, let me quickly save that. So I can always save my results that I don't have to do that. You say, okay, there's maybe more to it than only kidney failure. I want to look at renal impairment. And again, get my list and I say, okay, I'm interested in everything except for chronic, just for the sake of this argument here. And again, I get the list here with the lowest level term, the respective input I have chosen, and the codes. What we could do, for example, would then be to look out, okay, what does this mean in terms of ICD coding? And here we're quite fortunate. We have the mapping your group provides. So that's a MedDRA to ICD mapping. And I've just learned today that we should probably include the attribute as well to give our researcher the information on whether there's a loss of information or not while using that app. So thank you for that. Yeah, but you get more or less a translation from the codes you have selected here into an ICD coding system just by using the app. And we find that there are several pages of codes and some might be even not mapped. And that is then also highlighted here. So let me quickly save that as well. So what we have seen so far is this app allows me to save these things. But what can I do now when I save them? Well, I can download them. And while downloading, I can make them available also for analysts, programmers, and these persons that will then use them. So here, again, we have our two codes we have chosen. I hope you can see that it's not too small. So we have the kidney failure. I saved that one. Here's always the name I chose, kidney failure, and we have renal impairment. And then here I get all the respective codes that are app finds for these codes that are currently of interest. So that's already nice. That was considered our first win. But then we got more questions, and the questions were, okay, I not only want to identify the codes using the app, I have already a code list with several hundred codes. How can I leverage that? I prepared some examples. You open them quickly so that you get a feeling. So here's a very small list, but it's a list of codes, and we can use that in our app and upload it. And then the app does essentially same thing. It codes all of them. Again, it's a similar example. So we have again kidney failure identified, and we have found a long list of codes that are relevant to us for the few codes we have used in MedDRA. So that's the 10 codes. And we can then have them, for example, in our ICD-10 language that are relevant for our database. We could not only do that with one table. Again, we can save it. But we could do it for multiple. They would just upload a second. That is now called bleeding. So again, it doesn't really make sense to combine them, but for the sake of this presentation, should be fine, and we can do that. And now we have even a longer list, and it handles that as quickly as you've seen so far, and we could again get a similar result, saving it, downloading it, using it. We can, for MedDRA, we can use LLT codes, can use PT codes. There was an example for that. So that's a list of PT codes, and we always have to be aware. So let's I know that it's PT codes, and I can show you in a second, but let's for once do it wrong and use the PT codes while interpreting them as LT codes. What we find is we find a limited amount of records. Not surprising. Now it's just taking the codes and interpreting them as LT codes because that's what it knows. And it finds just those where these two codes coincide. Whereas if you would do it correctly, it would find more than those, and certainly somewhere down the line you can find them. So now you see it's over 1,000 records, so definitely a different result, and that also means that you cannot take away the understanding of coding and all the human components that we bring to using the app. It's just a tool to help, not necessarily a tool to completely replace. Shown a lot on MedDRA, but it's worth mentioning that we not only have MedDRA, we have other tools as well. For example, you could use SNOMED. This looks fairly similar, and here again we could just select a few things, and then we would, for us, get the SNOMED codes, or we can translate them to, for example, MedDRA due to the map you provide. Or something we could do is also map them to ICD, and that's something that comes with cautions. That's why I get a lot of these warnings, because here what we do is we have connected multiple maps, because at the point of development, and we're currently working on a new version of the lab, that's also where there's still some flaws on that. The correct mapping was not available to us, so we had to work with that compromise here, but we thought, okay, it's worthwhile to make our attendees aware of the problems that might come by using this thing. Yeah, and with that, I'm already on my last slide. So you have seen real-world evidence is important to drug development. If we want to deal with secondary data, we usually face heterogeneous information, and for that, coding helps. If we want to manage coding systems, then the code maps are quite important. But our users like an app more. That's why we have provided them one. And so far we got good feedback, and hopefully that also illustrates a bit on what can be done using these maps. In the future, we could certainly develop this app further, improve some of the current pitfalls, invest into AI machine learning to get better filtering concepts, all these kind of things. And also we could invest in something called a common data model that's, for example, relevant for the European health data space. But with that, I would like to end my presentation. And thank you for your attention. Looking forward for some questions.
Okay, well, thank you, Jan. We do have two questions. I think one of them is for you. The other, I think, is more for Nicole. So the question for you is regarding the application that you demonstrated. And the question is this application that you're demonstrating specifically for use at Merck, or is this something that others can access? And if so, how can they do that?
Currently, it is only developed within Merck, and I've not yet discussed with anyone at Merck whether we should make that broadly available to others as well.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question is, I believe this is more for Nicole. The question is there a plans to map MedDRA SMQs with ICD and SNOMED, or is this not helpful?
Yeah, so there's no plan to map the SMQs with ICD or SNOMED. The SMQs do contain preferred terms and LLTs that will be individually mapped, but not on an SMQ level. And with that being answered, I just want to clarify too my answer from earlier. So individual, there was a question around the codes for ICD mapping. So individual 3-digit and 4-digit ICD-10 codes in each chapter have been mapped to LLTs, and names for chapters and blocks were not mapped. So, and that's for chapters 1 through 19.
Okay, well, thank you for that clarification, Nicole. At present, there are no questions. Maybe we'll just wait a few seconds to see if anyone has any questions. Again, if anyone does have questions, they can send their question through the question pane in the GoToWebinar tool, and we'll answer those questions to the benefit of the audience. So we'll just wait here for a few moments to see if there's any additional questions. Okay, we do have a question here. The question is, I wonder how you handle the multilinguality of these diverse data sources. Also, I noticed that the demo focused on MedDRA version 24.1 versus ICD-10 mappings with newer versions of MedDRA. So I'm guessing the question is, how do you deal with the versioning within your tool versus ICD and then multilinguality?
That's a very good catch indeed. Yes, it's still MedDRA 24.1. I wanted to present the newest version, but then, as it usually happens with these development things, topics get delayed, and then you have to go back to the more stable older version. So we are currently developing one for MedDRA 26.1. I have to admit it's not that big of an issue, because usually also the secondary data is lagging behind in terms of coding. Only the newest records might be coded in MedDRA 26, whereas for the old one, older codings should be just fine. The multi-language thing of data sets, I'm not sure I completely understand. Are you referring to data that could be one coded in English and in French, or just using different codings in terms of, okay, back then it was ICD-10 and now it's ICD-11?
Okay, let's see if we get a response here about that.
Thank you.
So while we're waiting, another question, Jan, is how do Merck staff get access to this application? So perhaps one of your colleagues is asking about this that maybe not be aware of it.
Pretty easy. You just have to type the URL, and if you're in a Merck VPN, you have already access to the app. So just approach me for the URL. Happy to share if you don't have it, and then you should be able to use it.
Great, thank you. So yeah, the question that you were trying to answer is regarding, yes, different languages. How are different languages dealt with regarding the mappings?
Yeah, so ideally, our data sources are already taking care of that by providing the codes. So we hope, as codes being a unanimous language across the world, so numbers instead of words, to handle that. It's true, sometimes that's not the case. And then that's when we also have to leverage native speakers and persons of with extended knowledge on that regard.
Okay, great. So we have another question here. First of all, thanking you for the nice presentation. Could you please clarify how the mapping is made at Merck on RWD data? Do you handle it on a case-by-case basis or by individual research team, or do you map the entire databases across all dictionaries at once prior to initiating research projects?
Yeah, so the last one is tempting, and we were thinking about that, but it also, seeing the the majority of data sets and also the sheer size of these data, that could be challenging. Also being aware that it's not necessarily one coding we have available, but multiple codings in these data, and then that's when the mapping might be challenging. So currently we're handling it on a project-to-project basis using, for example, this app and agreeing on the language based on the data we have and the communication partners we're seeking.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions at this time. So I think we can probably move on to the remainder of our webinar today.
Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for taking the questions, Jan and Nicole. We'd like to hear from you, please, if you have any topics for the next webinar, or if you would like to present an interesting MedDRA-related topic at the webinar. The people to contact are Martin Menker, who chairs the steering group for the EU MedDRA user group, and that's his email address. And these slides will be available on the MSSO website, or you can tell the MSSO help desk at meddra.org, and that will also give us a topic and a little bit of the description about what aspect of the topic would be of most interest, because some people will just say wide thing like ADRs, coding, or clinical trials, and you're sort of thinking which aspect. So it would help to have a little bit of information about where you want to go. Are there any further questions, Brian, coming in at this stage? Because really that is the last useful slide. Apart from
Thank you,
thank you.
Christina. Yes, no additional questions at this time.
So I'd like to thank all speakers and participants for your questions. And unless there's anything else, we'll close this webinar early.
Okay, thank you all.
Have a good summer, everybody. Those in the
Thank you,
Northern
everyone.
Hemisphere.